On the agenda tonight, we're going to be taking a look at Judy Garland performing Over the Rainbow and comparing that with a recent rendition by Kelly Clarkson. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So this particular request came through on Facebook and it was somebody asking me whether this performance has been edited in any way from a pitch perspective, and they mentioned that it was Kelly Clarkson. And I replied saying that I haven't analysed it because, of course, I can't instantly analyse something. It takes a few hours. But I stated that Kelly Clarkson has a great voice. So I said that it's unlikely to have been edited from a pitch perspective because of her vocal accuracy anyway. So, hence this video. I have analysed it, we'll jump into it, and we'll be taking a look at Judy's vocal, of course. So, we'll jump into Kelly's performance first, and this is from the Kelly Clarkson show. And, of course, we have the pitch monitoring software up on screen so we can see what's going on. And I'm going to jump in here just to mention there are going to be links in the description below if you want to watch this performance or Judy's version all the way through without me interrupting it. But I mean, already, sadly, and to the person that requested this video, even though I did say that I doubt Kelly's version would be pitch corrected, we can already see that it is pitch corrected. As we've seen with hundreds of singers, they might occasionally hit a line just because they're great singers, but never time after time after time. And already in this phrase, you can see the F sharp 4 here, we're stuck to that line. The G sharp 4, we're stuck to the line. But actually, you can hear the processing going on the F sharp 4 here and the A3 before that. So have a listen to this again. Way up high. And actually, the F sharp 4 here again, it's just been too heavily used, so that as soon as you run it through this, you can see that it's not a natural vocal. This has been recorded by Kelly and then it's been edited afterwards before being released. But it's now happening as an industry standard for music released through TV shows. And obviously if Kelly wasn't hitting the notes exactly right, they are going to edit it before then releasing it to now make it sound perfect. But it's too perfect because it's just A440 standard tuning. It's just exactly on these lines, which it shouldn't be. And something that I did for the sake of this video was run the guitar through the pitch monitoring software so that you can see what a tuned instrument looks like on the screen. So I'm going to get rid of that and bring on the guitar. And as we have a little look through here, already you can see the C3 was flat. And this is a tuned guitar. So what I want to explain here is that when you're playing an instrument, you tune it up. You can't tune vocal cords, but you tune a guitar. So we're going to be having an A, an open D. We're going to have things that are ringing out, like great example here, the D3, as I mention it, is perfectly on the line because it's an open string that has been tuned. As soon as you place your fingers on the fretboard of a guitar, or on the neck of a violin, once you introduce that human element of slightly bending a string and fretting it slightly differently from one player to the next, more so with violins because you don't have frets, but you'll notice this kind of thing where the instrumentation, in this case the guitar, is flat, but the vocal is getting snapped to these lines. So the vocal is now irrelevant to the guitar in the background, which is why it sounds mechanical and processed. So this is a major thing that people don't realise, and I'm sure Kelly doesn't realise this, that she's now taking herself out of context. Because if you're pitch correcting the human voice, which isn't tuned, but something that is tuned can't even hit these lines, then you think, well, what are we doing? Why don't we just allow the voice to be what it is? And I'm sure that Kelly's voice would start to adapt to this tuning. She would hit the notes slightly flat as well because of what she's listening to. We'll listen to the guitar. A, and then we go literally A, the A2. I said that we had an open A string, an open D string. So here's another example of a tuned instrument, and look at how it looks on the screen. It's just a straight line on A440 standard tuning, because that's what the string is. That's what it's been tuned to. This can't be done to vocal cords. You can't tune them to open strings. So when we go back to having a look at the vocal from Kelly, when we have a little scroll through here, this kind of thing stands out because it's now turning the vocal cords into a stringed instrument. And it isn't that. It's something physiologically that has to be controlled. You can't just hit the vocal cords and then they ring out. You've got to put air through the vocal cords. You've got to control the air. There's so much more going on. When we're starting to think about all of the old singers and the previous generations of singers, why you can categorically say now that there's never going to be another singer like Judy Garland, because everything that's being released is being tuned. Judy's voice wasn't tuned. Something that we can say about this performance from Kelly, of course, is that it's pitch corrected. It's not auto-tuned. And we know that because she's got quite a wide vibrato. Have a listen to this. You can see the waves here and the fact that we've actually ascended with that vibrato. Even though somebody's going through this and trying to do it subtly, they're still just doing it too much. And, you know, it becomes really obvious when you look at it on screen. But let's continue. And it's just this kind of thing, being on the F sharp 3, and being directly where a guitar would be in terms of tuning, and sliding up and coming up to the D4, being bang on the D4 again. These are two notes here that are consecutively on these lines, which means that they're tuned, because we just had two held notes that are on the lines as well. It's just not how human vocal cords work. And I always get reminded of people that say, oh, maybe the singer's just that good. If Kelly Clarkson was an amazing singer, which she is, she would be missing these lines. That's the whole point, that this is something that instruments are tuned to, but vocal cords aren't tuned. If it's a great singer, they'll hit the average frequency of what they can hit. In the case of just having that flat note, Kelly would be ever so slightly flat as well because she's matching it, but that's been erased from the vocal, and we just hear this edited version that's then released. I mean, the B3 here again is just way too much, just perfectly over, and then when we go back to it, perfectly over again. In a lullaby. I mean, even the slides have been a little bit stuck here. And again, so anyway, yeah, we're not going to go through this whole performance because the person was just asking me to have a look at whether it's pitch corrected or not. So before we do leave this, I want to just jump in to the end of the performance, because Kelly makes an artistic choice about where she goes with the melody that isn't where the original melody goes. So let's have a listen. If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I? And there we have it. So, as you no doubt noticed, the last note isn't the note that you're expecting. So normally what would happen is you would resolve to the A4. And the A4 would be the root note of your chord, the underlying chord, the key that this is being performed in. So when you go from na, 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 that you go up a semitone from the G sharp 4 to the A4. But here we're going up to the C sharp 5, which is the major third. So if we're going na, it's the third note if you count through that major scale. So the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale. So we're going to the third there rather than the root note, which would be na or ah, the octave higher in this particular key. Obviously it's high for me because I'm a guy, but going to this different note, I mean, it's interesting. It means that it's not resolved. I would probably prefer it just to be what it is. Just, you can't be just resolving to the root note of your chord. But the other thing is, because she's going to a different note, it's interesting artistically, but I know that people will say, but it's been digitally altered so that even if she missed that note going a lot higher than the original, you can probably afford to throw caution to the wind, because even if you miss the note, you can just correct it afterwards. And, you know, the same for the G sharp 4 here. If that wasn't exactly on pitch, it can just be moved after the performance. So, yeah, I don't know. It feels like there's this conflict of interest between the artistic choice of the note being probably a lot more difficult to hit because it's so much higher, but then pitch correcting it. So you've done something that's technically more difficult, but it's like your voice has that safety net of if you miss it, it doesn't matter because we'll correct it before the release of the video on the TV show or on YouTube, wherever it's being released. So this is the problem. And I know that a lot of people do look at pitch corrected performances differently because they want somebody to sing naturally and to be able to hit these artistic notes just by themselves. So now we're going to get Judy Garland's voice up on screen to see how it differs. So of course it goes without saying that back in the late 1930s, digital pitch correction or auto-tune didn't exist. So we just got to hear some great voices. But when we look at these lines up on screen, I mean, just super accurate slides here. And the fact that Judy, even at this young age, had this controlled wide vibrato. But you can just see how when you're looking through this, you're never really ever going to see lots of lines being hit all the time, one after the next. And by the way, this is a semitone lower. So it's, rather than in A, it's in A flat or, you know, G sharp when we're looking at the pitch monitoring software. And you can see that this first that change of the G sharp 3 up to the G sharp 4, we've got that instant octave change. But here at the beginning, and this is the kind of thing you'll see all the time, that the note actually started halfway between the G and the G sharp 3, and then she was directly over the line for a split second, had the vibrato, and then as she slid up, went sharp with the G sharp 4, then vibratoed down through, you know, to the G4 there. But let's listen on. I love the way that she connects all of these phrases so that it's just done all in, well, in one breath, but all at once, just allowing this to flow. But have a listen again. So yeah, there's a little break from over the rainbow and then back up to the G sharp 4. Obviously it's very high for me as a guy, but again, have a look here. Listening to this, nobody's ever going to say that she sounds out of tune. But we can see the evidence here that great voices are not only sharp of these lines, but noticeably flat in between the D4 and the D sharp 4. So technically speaking, this is Nowheresville in terms of the key of the song and the pitch of the vocal and where it should be, but it just sounds spot on because it's got the freedom to go where the voice goes. It's not a tuned instrument. So yeah, this kind of thing would have been pitch corrected. And this goes back to a point that I made earlier in this video, that nowadays you will not hear a voice like Judy Garland's because this won't be allowed. You're not allowed to miss these lines nowadays. Everything is tuned. But let's listen on. Way up high. And like I said, you know, we will occasionally hit these lines, but here we're really close, but again we're slightly sharp. It isn't being tuned to the G sharp 3, it was just really close to it because of Judy's ear, but also listening to what she's singing along with when she was doing this in the studio. And again, really important point to make here, this was just an F3 and it was a held note, but look at how it looks on the screen. It's not a straight line. It starts on the F3 and it goes sharp and then it ends up flat. But when you're listening to that, because this is all split second stuff, have a listen to this word. There's. It sounds like a straight note, but it isn't, because this is what the human voice does. And this is where everyone's going wrong when they're pitch correcting vocals to the extent that they are. They're flattening this kind of thing out. Even though it sounds like there's, it sounds like a straight line. But it isn't. So yeah, if it sounds like it's a note, I would say just leave it. But people and producers aren't listening anymore. They're looking. So they're looking at lines like this. And, you know, through pitch correcting software and, you know, Melodyne, for example, which is something that I've mentioned before, you're looking at lines, you're looking at the vocal and they're dragging them, making them all go to a line, you know, go straight. So this is where, you know, if it sounds good, just leave it. That I heard of once. I mean, again, look at the way that we start flat of the C4 and we actually end up between the C4 and the C sharp 4. And again, we're listening to one of the best voices of all time here from a pitch perspective. And this is the problem, that everyone now has such perfect pitch, as in being over these lines, that their voice is never going to sound as good as Judy Garland's because she didn't use that. Everyone is now using crutches and therefore their voices can't perform as well as somebody's voice who's just a great singer and has the freedom to do it. So, I mean, by saying it's a crutch, it really is, because it means it's like you're injured. Your vocal cords aren't allowed to go where they should be allowed to go. But of course they did during the performance, but the audience never get to hear it. And again, it's amazing how we are now between notes here, but it still sounds great. And I mean, we're pretty much almost on the line, slightly sharp here with the C4, but like I said, this kind of thing will happen now and again with a great voice, but not once, twice, 3 times in a row, and then maybe a little gap and 4 times in a, 5, and constantly on these lines. Because when we're looking at these lines, just take in how many times we see a straight line on these white lines. I mean, whenever there is a held note, you can see how it's not over the lines. But again, Judy's pitch is so bang on, it is absolutely ridiculous. And I know that we've looked at Judy Garland before and this performance, but I'm just using this as a comparison just to show the difference between the late 1930s and now, almost 100 years later, how you can't get this anymore. You're not going to hear this kind of vocal. First of all, one that's this accurate, but you're not even allowed to appreciate the accuracy of somebody's natural voice. Even though, here, it's amazing that you can see where she starts to level off halfway between notes again and then slides up to perfectly that G sharp 4. And and all of these, again, between the lines here. And yeah, this is the kind of thing that's just getting eradicated now. But it's interesting to look at a voice like this to see how out of tune she is throughout the performance, because that's what this is showing you, that she's actually hitting notes here that are as far away from the notes she should be hitting as is physically possible when you're talking about singing from one semitone to the next. So yeah, I mean, really interesting to look at. Thank you guys for requesting the Kelly Clarkson video in the first place. As always, let me know what you guys think. And if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Keep those requests and suggestions coming in the comment section below. And I'll catch you guys at the next one. Rock!